Let's now look on the actual structure of the organization, not the building, but actually the building of the infrastructure of the different people and the relationships. You'll see here a couple of charts we'll talk about as we go through. You'll look at the concept we just talked about of centralization. We're going to have a lot of different aspects here, and then the decentralization, where you're going to better adapt to the customer wants, centralize greater top management control, and more efficiency. And then over here, more worker empowerment. So it depends what you're trying to do. It's going to depend to some extent also about the aspect of mechanistic work versus organic work, but also a lot of it really comes down to what does the leadership want to do? So sometimes there are some people, they must have control over every aspect of it. We'll talk about that type of motivation in a later chapter, but you also have people that really want to sit down and make certain the customer is happy in the process. So the disadvantages of centralized, they're less responsive, there's less empowerment for the employees. You have more internal dissent of the employees. They get fed up with all that hyper control in the process. On the decentralized, there's always less efficiency. You'll have different ways. You may have 5 different sites, and each site is doing 1 or 2 things different from the other ones. And that's kind of the nature of that, and there's less top management control. A big issue is span of control. Now, it used to be in the old days, before we had so much digital technology at our fingertips, you'd have a span of control of 5 to 7 employees. So the supervisor would have 5 to 7 people working for him. The first job I had when I had this massive thing, it was me, my assistant, and 52 employees. Now, that was awesome. And you can really do that relatively easily if everybody's doing exactly the same work. The problem was I had 24 different job descriptions with 52 employees. So that was kind of a really tough thing because everybody's doing something different. So the span of control really is going to vary by the person's skill set, but also what you have. But we've had a lot of change. It used to be the supervisor must control all the information. I have it all and I control it. It's not the same way anymore. What you have now is you can have all the employees have all of the information that you want them to have. Boom, right now at their fingertips. So now the supervisor doesn't have to be the controller of the information. They just have to make certain the information is implemented the way they want it to have. So it's going to really change by the time you're all done. The span narrows at the higher levels. Usually it just depends what you're at. You might have the lowest level supervisor supervising 15 to 20 employees if they're all doing homogeneous jobs. In other words, jobs that are the same. And so you have a homogeneous job versus this whole thing, this menagerie of multiple different jobs. It just depends what they're doing and also how complex those jobs are. But as you go up in the organization, sometimes you're looking out there, and keep in mind, you're also looking as to the scope of the work. You're talking about really strategic planning is 3+ years out. Tactical planning is 1 to 3 years. And the operational is really less than a year. And oftentimes you're planning what the work is going to be done this week, this day, this month, but you're looking at less than that. So you're going to have the span of control very similar to that as well. You're going to have tall organization structures. The example is probably Amazon. You'll see Amazon, you have drivers doing basically exactly the same work. They'll have a different vehicle. They'll maybe set the interior of the vehicles up differently, but pretty much an Amazon driver, load them up, and you have the whole fleet driving out and everything else. I don't know about you. I've seen an Amazon group leaving out, and one time I counted 32 different Amazon trucks all turning left at the same light, all at the same time almost. It was interesting. Okay, and so you'll see a very tall organization structure where they have a different aspect, but you also see these super flat structures. And the flat structures, we all want to save money. Eliminate those middle managers. They don't need them at all. But I got to tell you, you start eliminating positions, especially management positions, you better have better training and better communication in the process. So here is a flat structure. You might have an owner manager. You might have the owner manager running everybody and everybody coming to the owner manager in the process. If you're going to have this flat structure, a lot of training, and a lot of making certain you know what the expectation is involved. That owner manager better chirp, 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 chirp quite a bit to make certain there's good, solid two-way communication happening in an organization, and the expectations and the training is there as well. So you can do it, but be careful on it. A lot of times you want to sit down and have departmentalization. You're going to have people doing that. Let me go back to the illustration of the polo shirt. You're going to have the cutting department. Okay, so they make a lot of cutting remarks. You probably figured that out eventually. So snip, 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 snip. All they do all day long is they cut, 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 cut. Now, there are certain jobs. You better have sharp scissors. You better make certain that you have all the pieces stored properly, exactly the same size. You want all the smalls, all the mediums. You want them separate from each other and stored properly. And then you're going to have the sewing department. You might say that had to be somebody in charge that has a sense of humor, keeps all the employees in stitches. You'll catch that one out. There's a thread of a conversation there as well, and I'm not needling you. So that being said, you'll have the cutting department, and then a different department handles all the sewing. And then by the time you're done, you're going to look at the sewing department. You might have the trim department that adds things to the basic overall design with different types of trim on it. Departmentalization, and that way you have separate units and people are comfortable doing that type of work and they're really hyper efficient at it. Sometimes though, you get bored out of your mind doing the same thing, and you want to switch departments, and sometimes it's very healthy to do. So departmental advantages, okay, they develop skills and progress. As they master more skills, you have this big thing called economies of scale. You reduce your cost. That's a big deal. Okay, which is really a positive thing for this departmentalization, and you can coordinate work within that function. You got people sitting there cutting different things, and over here, this person calls in sick. Somebody doesn't just kind of step right into that. Okay, you're going to cut extra large today. Okay, so you have that, and they already know how to cut, so you have all the specialization all in the same department. And then you sit there and go to the trim department, you go to the sewing department, you go whatever it might be, and you'll have people that have super skills. So by the time you're done, also, here's the disadvantages. What you tend to have happening, and I prefer to call this the silo effect. If you go out into farmland, you'll see these big giant tanks. Usually they're metal. In the old days, they were concrete tanks, and they're big things, and they're tall, round structures. And usually you'll see a arm coming up, and at the very top, you'll see something going in. There's a conveyor belt inside of that. And what happens is when the farmer goes and they grow their crop, they have grains, they separate the grain from the shaft of the wheat or whatever it may be, and then they shoot the grain to the top and the grain falls down inside. But you don't want to have your rye mixed in with your wheat. So you have a separate silo for your wheat. You have a separate silo for your rye. You have a separate silo. You may have 4 or 5 different silos, and each one has a different type of grain. And you never ever want to mix them with the other ones because that'll contaminate the whole thing. You have the same thing happening. We are the marketing department. Those people in accounting, I got so sick and tired of them. All they ever do is watch numbers, numbers, numbers. What makes the bottom line is me, our department, we sell, sell, sell. We're so important to the organization. The accountants say, those people in marketing, they're always trying to sell, sell. They don't care about the cost at all. People in manufacturing say, those people in marketing, they don't get anything at all. They just want to sell their product out there, but they don't realize all that's involved. I want to make a change. Yeah, I want to make a change. And it affects the whole line over here. And those people in accounting, this costs money. You have people that sit down, they fight for their cause inside their silo, and they diss everybody else that's outside of it. That's a problem, and probably the single biggest problem, departmentalization. So keep that in mind. We talk about different aspects here. You can see production, marketing, finance, human resources, accounting. They all have different things. So when you break it up by function, you'll see this. Sometimes you break it up a different way by trade books versus college text versus technical books. Okay, they're totally different markets, and you have the people grouped together to sit down there and sell the trade books. You have the group of people over here, and even though they have similar functions, you could break them up by function or by product. You're going to have a different way of doing it, so it depends how you're all set up. You'll see a lot of different things over here. This gal over here, she's sewing something on seat chairs. So by the time it's done, her handbag. Okay, so she wants to make sure that leather is already in the process. So she's there keeping somebody in stitches as well. Okay, but at the end of the day, that's a super expensive product. She better be highly skilled because they intend to sell that Celine handbag for lots of money. So her skill set has to be really fabulous. And if somebody replaces her in that department, they want to make certain that she can do a fabulous job because they're going to ask a lot of money for the stitches that they'll be seeing the entire time. A lot of times you can start breaking up organizations in different methodologies. When you look on an organization chart, you'll see solid lines sometimes. If there's a solid line, that means that person has direct responsibility over them. This gal here, she probably has a boss. The boss, if we follow the unity of command that we've already talked about, has a straight line to her, and the boss is there. You'll see a straight line. Now, in this process, though, the boss can tell her what to do. Now, if a human resource person comes by, the human resource person is not her boss. If an attorney for the company comes by, that's not her boss. If the plant manager comes by, almost for sure the plant manager isn't her boss either. They would tend to be a dotted line to her in the process. So we call that a line organization. And then you have line people that are directly in charge and they're supervisors. And then you have a dotted line that we call staff personnel. So you'll see it like this over here. Here you see the supervisors, they all have these straight lines, and the straight lines are notated on the organization chart. And the straight line means I am a supervisor, and you'll have the assembly line worker right there has a supervisor directly over them. Not the supervisor next door, not the supervisor here, but the one that's right over here. And the plant manager is over that supervisor. Probably if the plant manager came by and says, I want you to sit down there and sew that handbag this way, I would probably listen to him, even though technically that plant manager is not in charge of that assembly line worker. But that being said, technically the supervisor should be the only one because you're going by the principle of unity of command. Now, if a lawyer comes by, okay, the lawyer, you can see they're higher up in the organization, but you see those dotted lines? Those dotted line means they're advisory in the process. So they're going to talk to the plant manager. If the HR person walks over to the plant manager and says, hey, we got a problem over here. This person is happening over here. We're doing an investigation. I need your help on this. Do you think the plant manager is going to pay attention? The answer is yes. Not because the HR department is over them, but because of the fact that that person is looking out for the needs of the organization as a whole in human resources, and the plant manager should be responsive to it. The plant manager say, no, I don't want to hear what you say. I work for the CEO. You can't tell me what to do. They can probably get away with that a couple times, but overall, the CEO probably say, all right, on this issue, you need to listen to him. Do what he says. You'll have that aspect in the process as well. So dotted lines are not direct report people. They're advisory people, except you should probably listen to them, especially if it's about their expertise. A straight line and a line staff organization, that means they are directly in the chain of command for supervision. Then you get these critters here. It's called a matrix organization. No, it's not the movie series. Okay, but look at this. It can be much more confusing. And instead of having the fail principle of unity of command with one boss, you might have multiple bosses over here. Okay, so you're manufacturing. Okay, the boss here is my supervisor, and the supervisor then is the vice president of manufacturing. That's cute. Okay, now watch. Now you have project manager 3. You're assigned to work for that one as well as the person next to you and the person next to you. And you're working on the project. You have somebody in marketing, somebody in finance, somebody in engineering, somebody in manufacturing, and you're all working for the same project manager. Now you have a second boss, and that boss is there for 7 months. You finish your project, boom, you go work for somebody else. This is actually a relatively common model where you might have 2 bosses. You might have your own manufacturing boss, and you might also have a project manager boss in the process. It can be confusing, and that can be a problem, but you'll see this a lot of times on a global basis, depending on how big it is. So here's some of the advantages. There's flexibility on doing projects. There's inter-organizational cooperation and teamwork encouraged, but it's costly and it's complex. sometimes employees don't know who they're loyal to because the bosses may not like each other, and you have interpersonal skills. You have to sit down and work, figure out how to do that. So you have a whole series of different aspects in the matrix that could be problematic. So in this section, you need to know what a tall organization is, which means there's a lot of supervisors in the process. And you see that over here in the graph in the black and white. You need to know what a flat organization is, which you see over here in the bottom in the green. You'll have a span of control, which means how many employees a supervisor has. Know what a matrix organization, and know also what line and staff mean. Take care.